I'm Ricardo Dahis. I'm working at Monash University right now, originally from Brazil. And I'm an economist studying political economy, environmental economics, development, and in particular here for the purposes of this lecture, decentralization and federalism. So my lecture today was about decentralization and governance. I structured it basically in 3 parts. In the first part, I decided to overview the main arguments for and against decentralization, trying to paint a broad picture, showing that there's no real obvious set of arguments that are both general and valid towards, in favor, or against decentralization. In that part, I overviewed some of the arguments like administrative efficiency, like local competition of governments, like checks and balances between local governments and the federal government, etc. And reviewed it for the audience to have a broad picture. The second part of the lecture, I collected some data at the cross-country level from the IMF, from the World Bank, and from VDEM to measure politics and electoral data, just to show at the country level if there's any clear relationships between amounts of decentralization as measured by the percentage of expenditures done at the local government level and outcomes that we care about, such as GDP per capita, such as school attendance, health achievement, even inflation and corruption, and just showed that there's no real obvious correlation there. In some of the indices, there's a positive correlation that the more decentralized countries fare better, but in many of them, there actually aren't if you just look at the graphs. And even if you regress them in adding the fixed effects from the country level and continent level, etc., the relationships aren't that obvious. The third part of the lecture, I study 2 papers, one from myself and another from a set of authors, just as an example of recent applied micro papers that are trying to be careful with identification, with causality, with data, etc., that re-examine these questions that I first discussed in theory, then at the cross-section level, and to see what the more recent evidence shows. And in particular, these 2 shed a more broadly positive light on decentralization, but they're part of a family of recent papers that have been coming out in the last 5 years or so that I wanted to overview to give the audience a sense of what's been done recently.